And for now, welcome all. And thank you for joining us at FeedbackFruits for another webinar. In this edition, we're joined by Caryn here of Merage School of Business at the University College Irvine, California. And we're talking today on the theme of unlocking the power of collaboration and making better group work easy to organize. Thank you for being here, everybody. What we're doing today is looking at peer learning, collaboration, and feedback as part of a larger shift happening in education. And that's a shift away from the expert transmitting knowledge and toward an exchange of competencies and skills and attitudes, really as the purpose of higher education. And in this webinar, we'll take a few different angles towards this question of collaboration, why it's important, how we teach it, and if it's actually possible to make group work easy to organize. I'll first introduce myself and our guest speaker and give you a bit of background on the topic, and then we'll look at how we've been working together with Merage to try to bring about better outcomes for group work. Then there'll be space for a bit of Q&A. I'll have some questions for Caryn, definitely. And if there's time, we'll look at some of the new solutions that FeedbackFruits have been working on. So to introduce myself, my name's Daniel Hassan, and I'm a multimedia specialist at FeedbackFruits, working with the team here to produce use cases, videos, and webinars like these. And today I'm joined by Caryn Neiswender, who is the Associate Director of Learning Experience Design at Merage. Caryn has also supported the development of courses at UC Irvine in various roles, and she's a big proponent of using technology to support good pedagogical practices and learning experiences. So we get along well. And Amber Parker, Associate Director of E-Learning Support Services, unfortunately couldn't join today as she got sick. But as her work is part of the story we're sharing today, Caryn has graciously accepted to present some of her insights on her behalf. So thank you, Caryn. Get well soon to Amber. And Caryn, it's an honor to have you with us today. So thank you once again. So something we all have in common, Caryn, Amber, myself, those who are listening, probably everyone who is listening, something that we've all been involved in is group projects during our schooling. The reason there are group projects in almost all of our schooling, every curriculum, is that almost every profession requires team skills. And not all of us, but likely a majority, struggled with our group projects, with free riding and non-participating group members, with unclear expectations and unclear role divisions, with little instructor guidance or oversight in the collaboration process, or difficulties communicating, reaching other group members, or just with one person doing all the work, of course. That was group projects for many of us. We know they're important. Otherwise, they wouldn't be everywhere. But why do we actually do them in the first place instead of purely individual assignments? Well, as we answer that, we have to think about the learning outcomes of group work and group projects in the first place. The development usually of skills like communication, teamwork, leadership, and what have been called soft skills. And are they soft skills because they're not as serious as the hard skills, or because they're not as important as being an individual expert traditionally? Is it because the ability to communicate with our peers and work together is secondary? So what's primary? A good grade for many people. For students, they're happy with a good grade. It's often the goal for students to have the highest marks at whatever level of effort needs to be put in. A teacher will be happy with good grades. The institution looks good too. So good grades, great. And then in the real world, in the world of work, an employer has no idea how that grade translates into the ability to work in a team, grow from feedback, give feedback, succeed in a group dynamic. The employer requires collaboration skills, and education has to provide that. If group work and projects don't succeed, or if they're not adequately supported, or if they're not really a priority, but a outer consideration, if that's the case in higher education, then it's society, it's employers, it's us that are suffering as a result. So we need a society where we can collaborate on our own issues with each other and ourselves, but also those huge problems which we're all a part of, whether it's the environment or war or violence or social and human rights issues, global or personal issues. It comes from a lack of communication, collaboration. It comes from a destruction and disconnection. So what can the answer to that be apart from teaching, nourishing collaboration? So it's the duty of education to teach this, surely, effectively, at scale and updated with our needs today. I'm sure a lot of listeners have their experiences with group work too. How can we as educators enable fruitful group work in course design, facing those outcomes of better collaboration and communication? Is it just about having a group project in your course? I would say there's much more to it than that. Facilitating collaboration isn't just about the activities you choose and deciding that students will complete some group assignment. If you want to reach these objectives, to actually get to a point where you can nurture good team players, good leaders, well, it's not one person's job. You need a team to tackle that huge amount of work that goes into it. There's group formation, organizing, processing, analyzing groups and their feedback individually within the group from the teacher, all that data, knowing as a teacher and as a course designer, assistant supporter, where, when to step in to give just-in-time feedback to an individual, or to use all the data from a course, aggregated, collated, and to see how to use that to update and evolve future courses. A team does this. It's the outcome of collaboration. The educators who are putting in all of this work and orchestrating better group work, they are the ones who are the experts on this topic. So I'm glad that Caryn is here to share her journey and her results at Paul Merage. And for asynchronous viewers, the video and slide deck contain a summary of what I've said. I'm skipping through those slides now so I can get to Caryn, who I'll ask to take the floor, and I'll give the remote. So Caryn, please go ahead.
Thank you. So yes, thank you for the opportunity to share a bit about our experiences here at the UC Irvine Paul Merage School of Business. As Dan said, I wanted to express regrets for my colleague Amber, who was unable to make it with us today. She was excited about being in the webinar, so I'm sorry that she's unable to join us, but I will go ahead and share information from both of us. So let's start by learning a little bit about who we are as Paul Merage School of Business. So first, we have a variety of modalities. So there are all kinds of interactions that we have with students, ranging from in-person to online and every combination in between. We teach both graduate and undergraduate courses. So we have students at a variety of different levels as well. All of these courses are actually offered in our learning management system, which is Canvas. So that is kind of the backbone for all of the interactions that you're going to see today. Amber and myself are part of the digital learning team here in the Merage School. Again, I'm part of the learning experience design group. I manage the efforts of our team of folks who partner with faculty to build out courses. Everything that we do is pre-launch. Amber's team is the e-learning support services. Most of what they do is post-launch. So that kind of gives you a feel for where our two teams break down a bit. So to give you a little bit of context, oftentimes when you work with vendors in higher education, sometimes those relationships are a little bit difficult to manage. And I will say that FeedbackFruits has been a fantastic partner. They have been really great at answering questions and really great at helping us launch and be successful here in the school. So we actually have regular check-ins with our main contact from FeedbackFruits. So every other week we get together and have not a long conversation, it's just a quick conversation because we're kind of respectful of everybody's time, but it gives us a chance to kind of touch base and make sure that we are moving forward together. Sometimes we've asked them to help us kind of think about an assignment before we start to build anything. So this helps us kind of imagine the full functionality of FeedbackFruits and how we can bring that to bear on the assignments that we are creating and the activities that we're building out in our courses. And once we build out those courses, our contact has also been more than willing to take a look at what we've put together. This has saved us, as you can imagine. There have been little gotchas at some points that we've had in our assignments that our contact has said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" and kind of given us alternative options for ways to structure the assignment. So this has been extremely helpful for us. And it also helps us keep up to date with new documentation that is released pretty regularly and or new feature releases. So new functionality that we can access and utilize within FeedbackFruits. So again, I just really want to speak to the strength of the partnership that we've had with FeedbackFruits. They've been a great group of folks to work with, and they've really helped us be successful in the activities that we've had. So let's talk a little bit about that peer-to-peer learning. As a learning experience designer, I'm always going to be happy to share pedagogical frameworks. This happens to be one that was published from Harvard, and it kind of addresses how that peer-to-peer learning is going to affect individual students' learning. So in the paradigm, we start with an action, we move into reflection, and then we move into growth. And you can see it's a triangle, so it's kind of that infinite loop. Let's dig into each one of these just a bit more, just to kind of give a little bit more context. So when you think about that action, in peer-to-peer learning, this is actually where students are engaging with the content and the materials. They're starting to develop deliverables. They're starting to use some of the materials that you provided them in the course, and they're starting to kind of dig a little bit deeper with the knowledge and the content. In the process of completing the peer review, there's going to be some reflection. So they're going to start to assimilate some of that feedback that their peers have given them. It's an opportunity for them to get different perspectives in relation to the work that they put in. And it also helps the students kind of think about how they can improve or work on the original work that they've done. In addition, in the peer review process, there's also an opportunity to kind of learn from what the other students in the course have developed and how they've processed and worked with the content. So that starts to give the students an opportunity for growth. As you can imagine, once you're in that peer-to-peer learning process, there's a huge amount of feedback that you're going to kind of put all that together. And there's a metacognition there to figuring out, what have I learned, how have I learned it, and how can I improve it? So that's really where that growth piece takes place. So you can see this three-pronged approach from a pedagogical perspective to peer-to-peer learning. You kind of need a tool that will help you facilitate this as you're working through this process. So we'll talk more about how this works with the FeedbackFruits tool set, but this just kind of grounds us in what the student is actually going to go through as they're learning in the process of completing these types of activities. So speaking of activities, there are two that I'm going to share information with you today. And interestingly, once we get in the peer-to-peer space, sometimes the terms get a little bit loaded. So I wanted to make sure that we were all kind of on the same page as far as what types of assignments we're talking about. So when I refer to peer review, what I'm explaining is that paradigm where a student will create a deliverable, they're going to submit it into a system where other students will look at that deliverable, provide them with feedback. Then they will go back, the original student will go back into the system, look at the feedback provided by their peers, and then make an iterative improvement on the original deliverable. So that's just to kind of level set what I mean by peer review. So let me paint a little bit of a picture of the before FeedbackFruits time for what the learning activities looked like. So the first is there was a before peer review time. And if you think about this is really a student interacting with the content that the instructor has put out, creating deliverables, submitting the deliverables directly into a learning management system, in our case, Canvas. The instructor or the TA provides feedback, and then the student kind of absorbs that feedback and does an iterative improvement based on that 1 point of feedback from their assignment. It can feel isolating for a student because their whole experience is with the material, the technology, and the instructor. And it's less about kind of making those social and learning connections with other students in the course, and it's more about hyper-focused on what those deliverables are. Also in the before time, we used native peer review functionality from within Canvas. So there's always going to be some challenges that start as technical and bleed into pedagogical when you start to use some of the native LMS peer review functionality. Because what starts to happen is folks just by necessity, have to focus on the technology instead of the learning that you want facilitated through that process. So a couple of the major barriers that we experienced when we were using the native Canvas peer review functionality. There's only one assignment due date. So you find students going, okay, is that the date that I should submit my original deliverable? Is that the date that I should submit the feedback on the other students? Or is that the date that I should submit my revised deliverable? So seems very simple to have only one assignment due date, but it actually generates a significant amount of question and angst over, wait, what am I supposed to do and when am I supposed to do it? And again, kind of focus on process more than content. Canvas also provides only one rubric. So you find instructors having to pick, do I add to the peer review assignment the rubric that I would use that may have categories or items that students don't fully understand? Or do I add to the Canvas peer review assignment a student-friendly rubric, and then I have to find a way to provide them the more complex functionality that I would normally give as an instructor? So that decision directly affects the student's experience of that peer review assignment. The only thing that students have to do in the peer review assignment in Canvas is add a text response. So you can imagine if I'm a student and I have a lot going on that week, and I know that a peer review only requires a simple comment, that can make my life a lot easier when I'm going to submit it and get all of my checks marked off as my to-dos for that list. And also the Canvas peer review only provides an individual assignment. So let's take a look at the after picture with FeedbackFruits. So the first thing to understand is FeedbackFruits is built and designed specifically for peer-to-peer learning. And the specific peer review tool is designed specifically for peer review. So they understand that you're going to need a couple different dates on an assignment. They understand, for example, that there are going to be students who are going to hand things in late. And how does that affect how peer reviews are assigned? They understand that there might be situations where a student isn't going to submit that original deliverable, but you still want them to have the experience of reading the work of their peers and providing feedback on their peers. So they're very thoughtful about the different options that are available within an individual assignment. And they are practical in terms of what's actually going to be experienced when you get into a course. So again, it's designed specifically for peer review. It has multiple dates. A peer review, just by its very nature, is going to give students more points of contact. So that provides more perspectives for students reading and responding to their work. So that is incredibly valuable. It provides a richer experience for students to collect feedback on their work and be able to incorporate some of those points of feedback. Instead of it just being an instructor or a TA's response, it's going to be somebody who is probably at their stage in learning or close to their stage in learning, and is also kind of grappling with some of the concepts, and being able to kind of get feedback from those perspectives is incredibly helpful. And there are a variety of options that you can configure when you're collecting feedback from students. So you can see in the screenshot you can add a rubric where you have specific criteria and specific levels within that criteria. You can add a scale criteria. So instead of specifically defining what each individual point in that criteria is, you can just say 1 to 10, how successful did they use analogies, for example? And they can put in the scale of however they want to do that. And then you can also have comment-only criteria. And this is designed to really be qualitative feedback on each of the different pieces of assignment that the students are submitting. But it really gives you a rich way to put together a form for the students to submit the criteria. The more clear you can provide these criteria, the better feedback you're going to get from the students. So kind of going through that process of putting yourself in the mindset of the student, how would you craft the rubric? How would you craft the criteria? How would you craft those questions? Will help get a stronger feedback from the students in the process. All right, this is a huge one because FeedbackFruits, or a peer review by its very nature, is complicated and the data gets complicated. FeedbackFruits says, let us do the math for you. So what you do when your peer review assignment is they give you specific criteria, which you can see here, and they're toggle. You can turn them on or off, and you can add a weight to each of the different criteria. And then FeedbackFruits will go through, collect all of the data from the students in the assignment and actually calculate that score for you. And those scores are automatically sent to the gradebook. So it is much more streamlined as far as the grading is concerned. And one thing that is also really great about the FeedbackFruits peer review is there's all kinds of extras. So the 3 that you see here appear at the bottom of the assignment. Note the automated feedback on writing. I think we've all been kind of immersed in the world of AI of late. So this is an AI functionality within the FeedbackFruits tool. But I would encourage you to go through and kind of click through all the different options and settings. What you'll see is that there are a lot of things that you can toggle on, toggle off, and adjust. For example, these are the main sections for the options in a peer review. And I put some arrows near the ones that have been kind of game changers for us. But you can see there's everything from how many files do they submit, when do they submit them, to do they do a self-assessment, and at what point do they do that self-assessment? Do they provide feedback on the reviews that they've received from other students? A lot of different options that you can configure. So this is the peer review. This is that type of assignment within FeedbackFruits. But there is a second type of assignment that also speaks a bunch to what Dan was speaking about earlier, where you've got collaboration in a course. And how do you kind of manage those interactions between students? So the second type of assignment that we utilize FeedbackFruits for is our group member evaluation. And again, just to kind of make clear what I mean by this language. So at the beginning of the course or near the beginning of the course, you're probably going to set expectations for how you anticipate students working together. Then you're going to give them an opportunity to work together on projects. But then you also want to collect that structured feedback on how their peers have contributed to that group work. And then that provides the faculty member with an opportunity to review what students have said about the contributions of their colleagues. So let's, again, take a look at the kind of before and after picture. I will say the before is kind of data ugly, is how I would classify that. We used a lot of surveys that had a lot of manual programming. There was logic that we included in the surveys. The surveys had to be rebuilt every quarter because we needed to put group information in there. Before we put the group information in, we actually asked students to spell the name of their group members. You'd be surprised how many different ways there are to spell a name like Caryn, for example, which makes kind of consolidating that data and analyzing that data very challenging. We did incorporate rubrics and comment boxes. So that was something that was available within the survey platform. But essentially what we were creating within these survey tools is a student record. And for those of you familiar with FERPA and student privacy in the States, this is a pretty significant thing, because now this means that we have to be careful with where the data is stored, how we handle the data, what we do with the data. Speaking of the data, it was messy. It was structured in a CSV. It required pivot tables or other analysis tools. And oftentimes we had to have staff in the middle helping folks figure out, what does all this data actually mean? And how can I actually even read the data? So if we look at the after picture, this is one of the biggest places where FeedbackFruits is going to make a huge difference. So you can see just over on the left-hand side, the interface is very easy to use. Faculty didn't need us in the middle to help them with this. They could go in and figure this out on their own, get it completely configured and get it up and running without any intervention from us. One of the ways that we helped facilitate that, and that FeedbackFruits helps facilitate that, is through notes in the process. So this is an example of kind of setting the tone for what the actual activity is going to be. And note up in the top, they have set up instructions video. So in addition to text feedback, they also provide video feedback, and you can also provide video feedback. There's no manual programming, and the tool itself connects directly into Canvas. So it'll go and it'll see where all your groups are. It'll see all the members of your group, and it'll automatically assign the peer reviews to the members of the group. There is a pretty straightforward grade configuration, so very similar to the peer review. Again, you've got a bunch of different criteria that you can toggle on and off, and you can provide weight for, and it will automatically do all that calculation for you. And it will send the scores to the gradebook. So again, pretty straightforward, pretty night and day difference from using surveys for group member evaluation and FeedbackFruits. Again, there are a bunch of different settings that you can configure. One of my favorite ones is this one up here, number of reviews to complete with an all option for intergroup. Don't know about your sites, but the first couple weeks of a course, there can be a lot of students adding and dropping and groups changing and group member configurations adjusting. With FeedbackFruits, you can actually configure your group member evaluations before your course is launched. Set this as the flag for the number of reviews, and FeedbackFruits will automatically say, okay, you're in a group with 2 other people, so you only need to review those 2 people. You, on the other hand, are in a group with 5 other people. You're going to need to do 5 other reviews. So it's smart enough to handle all of that change that happens. And it just handles it seamlessly behind the scenes. The other thing that's very nice is that outlier detection. So it lets you as an instructor kind of take a step back, let the students provide all the feedback, and then go into the analytics, the group member evaluation, and easily identify the high achievers and the low achievers. So it definitely gives you those outlier detections. Can save a significant amount of time when you're looking to provide more direct feedback as an instructor and interact with the students as an instructor. All right. So that's kind of the story, but we also have a story in our data, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So we have, again, you're talking to somebody who works with instructors to build out courses. So we have 11 distinct courses. Those actually translate into 86 scheduled classes. So those are 86 different times that one of our courses is offered in the scheduled classes. All of these are using FeedbackFruits. On average, we have about 100 students in each course. So it ends up to be 101. Our high course was 279. Our low course was 33. So you can imagine providing intense feedback or extensive feedback for 279 students is going to be prohibitive for any instructor, no matter how many TAs you have. Doing something like a peer review or a group member evaluation is a really nice way to kind of let the students interact with each other and get some of that feedback and different perspective from each other when you've got a course that is 279 or more. On average, each of our courses that uses FeedbackFruits creates about 5 assignments. Some of our courses only use the group member evaluation. Some of our courses use a combination of group member evaluation and peer review, and some of our courses only use peer review. So there's a pretty wide range of the types of assignments that folks use. Total activities in the 2 years that we've been using the platform, approximately 2 years, is about 86. So we have 72 peer review activities and 14 group member evaluation. When I saw that 14 group member evaluation, that really caught my eye because we've actually only been using group member evaluations since April. So you can see that this fits a need for our campus and for our school for the types of interaction that we need. I mean, it's been something that's been very useful for our courses. Let's look at the student perspective a bit. On average in these courses, students receive about 47 ratings and about 33 comments. So pretty rich, pretty significant amount of feedback that is coming in through FeedbackFruits. About 90% of our students read the work of other students and provided feedback on that work. So it was a really good opportunity for those students to not just do their own work, but to see how other students in the course process the same information and the same assignment instructions and produce deliverables based on that. About 70% of our students viewed the feedback that was provided by other students. This is an area that we want to improve on a little bit. And part of this was a learning process for us. We didn't always require that students go back and view the feedback within the system. So part of it was students figuring out, how do I view the feedback? And part of it was us telling them, no, 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 you need to go view the feedback. So this is something that will grow over time for us. So some lessons learned and some things that hopefully we can help to kind of streamline your adoption of a tool like FeedbackFruits. The first is, as Dan said earlier, let the pedagogy lead. Really what you're thinking about is that interaction with students, how students are learning, and use the technologies like FeedbackFruits to achieve those goals. Again, the partnership that we've had with FeedbackFruits has really been great because we have a like mind in this. It's not about the whiz bang of the technology, it's about the learning, and the technology helps facilitate that. So that is the strongest lesson that we've learned, or that has been reinforced for us. A few key takeaways. There is a lot in the FeedbackFruits options and the configuration. I definitely recommend starting simple. Start with kind of that basic interaction and then start to kind of layer and build on top of that basic interaction. Not only does that help with troubleshooting, but it helps your faculty fully understand the tool before they move on to the more complex configurations. So the thing that I love about this is with FeedbackFruits, we have kind of a ramp up that we can do, and we can start to get more complex. And I guarantee you by the time that we go to use a new piece of the system, they're going to have launched something else new that we can go in and have that kind of on our next, like, oh, let's try that next, kind of a thing. So definitely don't be overwhelmed by the options and start simple so you can be sure that you kind of ensure success with your students and your learning activities. Definitely ask the FeedbackFruits team questions. We've bugged them a number of times about, what does this mean? And how does this work? And that extends not only to those regular meetings that we have with our FeedbackFruits colleague, but it also appears to the small little chat icon in the lower left or right corner of the interface when you're working in the system. They're very responsive to that chat icon, and that chat icon is available to faculty, students, staff, administrators, anybody in the system. You can go in and use it and get help using that little chat icon. So definitely ask questions as you move into this. Some areas where we are hoping to grow in the future. They do have templates available. So being able to launch templates that our faculty can more easily adopt in their courses is one area that we're excited about exploring more on. The learning analytics and FeedbackFruits are actually quite extensive, and they are extremely useful. And it's a matter of making sure that our faculty know where to find those learning analytics and how to use them. This is one area where, again, our partnership is going to be very helpful because they've got documentation that we can ask them, how might you get a faculty member started, or what documentation exists out there? And kind of talking through some of the different functionality is going to be very helpful for leveraging the learning analytics. So with that, I will open it up for questions with Dan.
Thank you so much, Caryn. And to look at some of the questions we've received, we have a question about tips for crafting rubrics for the peer and group evaluation activity. How do you choose those rubrics, Caryn? Do you want to?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I would actually separate the two, the peer review and the group evaluation. I'm a huge fan with group evaluation of setting those expectations early on in the course. So you want to be sure that you talk with the students about what you anticipate happening in those group collaborative projects. Those expectations can seed your rubric. So being clear about what you want can help you kind of craft what you're going to ask students to respond and how you're going to ask students to evaluate the work of their group members in the evaluation. Part of it is going to be, so let me also take one step back. So I think all of us are very familiar with rubrics and the tabular format of the rubric. But I think our students oftentimes are more familiar with kind of sliders and how to interact with sliders in that way. So by leveraging sliders in your rubrics for group member evaluations, I think you start to kind of give the students a little bit more agency around how they're going to submit that feedback for their peers. Now, when it comes to the peer evaluation, again, I would kind of, as the learning experience designer in me says, think about what you are looking to achieve in that assignment, and then determine what levels of attainment can be articulated based on that outcome for the assignment. In theory, all assignments should be connected to your learning outcomes, so it should help you kind of measure where students are at that point in the process. I'm always a fan, if you have the opportunity, of having a student look at a rubric, if you have a student assistant, or if you have a team like digital learning and they might have student assistants, because oftentimes we as faculty and staff think about things in certain ways that once we put it in front of students, they're like, what in the world does that mean? So getting that direct input on the criteria for your rubric is important. I could talk for hours about rubrics, but I will
Let's
stop
leave some space
myself.
for the other ones. Thanks for that, Caryn. If you don't mind, I'm actually going to flick back through your presentation to already prime myself for some of these pieces that I think are also answers to our audience questions about equity, about scale, and where you have an average of 100 students across almost 100 different scheduled classes.
Yeah.
How do you make something that works for all of those different cases? And we also have a few more questions from the chat. I'll go through them. We might answer these and some others in a bit of a random order. But
Yeah.
what's being asked is about whether students discuss their received feedback in class in life moments. You know, that's another moment in the processing of feedback, the development of these feedback skills, where students might have a chance to expand personally in their group or in front of the whole class. And another question on how to support faculty and students in getting familiar with new technology. Good for you, that person, because that was one of my questions as well. What are the words of encouragement? What needs to be shown to them? And really, Caryn, what you've shown from the details of, if I can go back in my slides, just some of these configurations. Yes, it can be overwhelming. It can be way too much. And also the extra step of contacting our support while we're here and we're ready and eager to help. Even that can be a step too much when you're just trying to work out something small now. So I like this tip you gave of start simple.
And I can
Go ahead.
I can
Please.
address the two questions in the Q&A if you'd like me to.
Please. Do you want to start with whether they discussed their feedback in class?
Yeah. So this was one of the things that we were unsure about, because we do have a variety of face-to-face and hybrid and online. We weren't sure if how FeedbackFruits was going to work with all those different modalities. It actually works quite well. We learned some lessons in the process with in-class sessions or live moments, as you describe here. So one thing, for example, is don't release the feedback automatically when they submit their assignment, because what you'll find is the students will power through the entire peer review assignment instead of stopping at the point where you want them to reflect and talk in class. So that was one of the things that we learned, is to kind of put some manual pauses in the process so that they can't move on to the next step before they do that. But yes, we have had a couple of courses where the instructors have used FeedbackFruits for live sessions. The students have submitted work prior to the session. They submitted feedback for their peers prior to the session. And then when they got in the session, they workshopped with the instructor in that live session how to make adjustments, and they shared some of their feedback as well. So that absolutely is something that we have utilized it for. How do we support our faculty and students in getting familiar with new technology? I love this question as well. One of the things that I strongly encourage is have a low/no stakes peer review assignment where students can go through and just kind of experience the process. So maybe it is something about, something tangentially related to the course material, but not something that they're going to do for credit in the course. Giving them that direct experience in a place where they can make mistakes and experience what happens when they make mistakes is very useful. I will also say that the FeedbackFruits team actually has videos designed for students and documentation designed for students. So it's really handy to be able to show students at the beginning of a peer review assignment, this is what you're going to experience. I will say, because they're generated by FeedbackFruits, they have the latest and greatest in the screenshots and in the functionality. So you don't have to worry about like, oh, that button moved, or, oh, that's a different label now, or, oh, there's something new there, because they take the onus of maintaining all of that content on themselves. So it's really nice to be able to give students kind of a quick video. I believe most of them are actually generated by Dan and his team. So they use best practices of having, not hugely long videos, but videos that give the students the important, pertinent pieces in an easy to digest and very straightforward video. So highly recommend that as well. And again, spaces to play is kind of the strongest way that you're going to have folks become familiar with the technology. In our case, what happened is we had a couple of instructors who played, they actually talked to their own peers. And so instructor to instructor conversations helped increase our adoption of FeedbackFruits. So you'll find the more that you can go, oh, I didn't know I could do that, and they talk to each other, the more you'll increase your levels of use of the process.
It's a great tip about trying it out for yourself, because it's essential to see how it works, what you can expect as a student or in different roles or with different parts of the tool. There's another question in the chat about the challenge of facilitating group work in the context of asynchronous courses where you can't be sure that students are actually going to meet or be able to meet outside of class. So as well as peer reviews, Josh Gaston asks, what are some other asynchronous interactions aside from those reviews?
So I can tell you that those are the main ones that we've utilized in FeedbackFruits. There are other features and functionality available within FeedbackFruits that are features that we just don't have turned on in our system. So I believe there are things about kind of group submission, working together on deliverables. There are some kind of writing evaluation tools that extend beyond peer review. It's things like teams working together to put together a writing assignment. Those are the ones that I'm the most familiar with, but I might bug you, Dan, if you know more about the wide and rich resources of tools that are available from FeedbackFruits.
Our tools exist, yes, thanks, Caryn, in a spectrum of different tools and solutions, where Caryn and her team at Merage use two tools, peer review and group member evaluation. These themselves are part of a wider set of feedback and assessment solution, as we term it. We also have a collaboration and engagement solution, which includes things like interactivity in documents, audio, videos. There's team-based learning, which facilitates many stages, I think the entire stages of the team-based learning method, and group formation. I have a little bit prepared on group formation to be able to show. So I can share my screen on that one, if you'll bear with me. That's something that we have just now released as part of both feedback and assessment and collaboration and engagement solutions. Something that we developed, in fact, like all of our tools, features, functionalities, developed together with educators. In this case, it was the University of Groningen here in the Netherlands. And group formation does exactly what it says on the tin. You create survey questions or use them from a bank. There's an algorithm which automatically allocates students to be grouped similarly or dissimilarly according to those questions they've answered. And there's some flexibility in whether they can skip questions. There's the usual LMS integration and pulling in that group data from your LMS. And whether you've got, I think, 30 students, 300 students in a class, it's going to give you the same kind of results and flow and customization right there. I mean, so that's one thing which I think Caryn is excited to try out and co-create and develop on with us. Again, in the context of everything we build is no more than a response to and sometimes a prediction of the pedagogical needs and use cases of our partners and partnerships. So another thing Caryn mentioned was the need actually for having institutional rubrics, activities, and a bit more scalability and adoption with how those are made. What I've just brought up on the screen here is our very fresh and new attempt to facilitate that a bit more easily with an updated tool picker. So when you're first getting creating a new activity from scratch, or at what is now finally kind of the FeedbackFruits hub or homepage within the LMS itself, you can find, your library of personal activities you might have created, sandboxed, played around in. I know I've got quite a lot of unfinished business in my library. There's also your institutional library, course level, program level, and institutional level rubrics, activities, and all sorts of different things that you can expect to find in there. So, for example, learning journeys, which we term as a way of combining different sorts of learning activities, like a peer review and then a group member evaluation, maybe including automated feedback or a group formation tool in there. These can be found then within that library. This is a functionality which, of course, is intended to streamline and scale that ability to execute, both design and execute any kind of updates to the course itself. Yeah, so go ahead, Caryn. There's so much to talk about.
I know, right? I was just going to encourage folks to go to the FeedbackFruits website and go to solutions, because that gives you kind of a broad overview of all the different types of tools that are available. And you'll see there are a bunch of them. And there can also be creative uses for each of those tools. So encourage you to explore. And the FeedbackFruits team has been really great with us about letting us kind of see how it works before we actually adopted it. Don't be shy about asking for things that will help you get your site up and running with each of these tools.
Thanks very much, Caryn. You're doing my job for me at this point. I'm going to also ask, maybe you've had experience with this particular setting where Cheryl asks, after due dates pass, are students able to look back at their work for the rest of the semester? Can they download their feedback, or is that something only accessible to you or to no one? So also, if a student drops from the class, their submissions to the team discussion still available for viewing by their peers. Have you seen this case?
I'm not sure about the dropping the class. My instinct is to say that it would probably go away because it is heavily tied to the Canvas setting. So when the student drops the course, they're no longer, when FeedbackFruits goes to see who's in the group, there's nobody there for them to see. So I suspect that they would go away, but we'd have to test that. As far as the ability to go back and look at feedback throughout the entire term, absolutely. There are settings within FeedbackFruits about when they have to view the feedback by. So you have the option to cut that off at a certain date, or you have the option to leave that open. So that's another one of those places where kind of digging a little bit into the settings will get you where you need to go, regardless of how you want to set up the student access to the feedback. I should also mention with the download. So one of the things that we are, again, kind of an area for future exploration is those analytics. And with the analytics comes kind of exploring what the feedback looks like. So within the download that you get from FeedbackFruits, you can actually see pretty detailed responses to each of those rubrics and each of the pieces of information. So it gives you a good data set that you can then mine as an instructor in something like Excel, or insert your favorite data analysis tool here.
Yep. We're updating, as with many things, our data exports in terms of what that includes, how it's presented. And yes, well, we've got the CSV and Excel exports. We can always improve also on visualizing that data. I mean, Caryn, in your case, almost 100 courses with each, on average, 100 students. Each of those students, something like 30 to 40 comments and ratings. There are so many stories to be told. There are so many levels of detail that can be got into, and a team of teams is needed to analyze that data. So our job, of course, is to make that as easy for you as possible. Just to come back to Cheryl's question about students dropping out, about students being able to look back at that data, whether their submission stays really depends on the technical aspects of the API integration between FeedbackFruits and Canvas. So that really varies between different LMSs and situations and sorts of enrollments. But generally speaking, students can, if the option is toggled on, download their reviews, have a copy of their feedback according to the rubric. And one of the most heartwarming anecdotes I've heard from educator is that feedback from a peer review activity was used in a job interview as evidence for the development of the attaining of certain skills, which ties in the idea of employability collaboration. This is what is needed in society, and this is what we're trying to build and facilitate, and trying to get right through the real use cases that Caryn and educators here who are listening are really trying to get right. So back to, again, here on the screen, we've got activity templates. We're trying to make it easy to have one thing to change, share, copy, edit. Never to say that there is one size that fits all. I mean, we've already seen the sometimes scary amount of configuration options, but to say that there is one approach that we can take to give you the flexibility, the transparency, the visibility, data-driven decisions, which aren't based on unimaginable amounts of Excel spreadsheets, but something which is maybe giving you what you're actually looking for pedagogical-based improvement and iteration. We see a few more screenshots of how we can send these templates to our faculty. They then can edit them, adapt them. Maybe a rubric needs changing, a different amount of peers or reviews should take place. Caryn already mentioned about maybe feedback can be blocked off and then discussed in class to make a longer process, a more richer, deeper process out of that feedback.
Can I inject
I want to
one
end
thing
on
here?
this slide. Please go ahead, Caryn.
Yeah, so the one thing that I will add is with any assignment, you're going to have students who submit at different dates. And I just want to say that FeedbackFruits handles that beautifully. If you set the right configuration, which again, talk with your FeedbackFruits folks, the way that the system will work is it will only assign a peer review at the time that the student goes in to complete the peer review. So then it knows who's submitted and who hasn't. So it really does, there's a level of combinatorics and complexity to that FeedbackFruits handles very gracefully. Sorry, I just wanted to add that because that is perennially a challenge for instructors.
Well, thank you very much for adding that out. We're really at the end of the hour, half of it taken up by wonderful questions from the audience, and inspiring to see the detail and the depth that Caryn, you've been able to bring to this. As someone working on the team at FeedbackFruits, it's our aim to have good outcomes for the students in terms of their learning, for the faculty in terms of workload reduction, and the possibility to get back to teaching to make that learning possible without the tech hurdles. Apologies for the tech hurdles today in this session, but I think we're pretty much at the end of it now. I don't see any more open questions from the audience. Thank you very much for those who did take them. And for those looking at the slide deck and recording, we've got just some last things to share here. Caryn, again, it's been so wonderful to look at your use case, and I think we're probably going to be making more resources based on some of the insights that you've been able to share with us today. And thanks for all of our attendees on this webinar about the power of collaboration and making group work easier to organize. I hope we've tackled some of those sufficiently. And for the rest, there's more to come. These resources to check out, and our newsletter and YouTube channel are the best places to stay up to date with our latest blogs. Check us out on social media, LinkedIn, all of those. Thank you.